I want to find out if listening to audiobooks is bad for me as a novel writer. There goes that Audible sponsorship. Hi, my name is Marcus, and I'm the idiot on the writer's block. If you're new to the channel, I, the idiot, ask experts for tips on how to write, publish, and promote my first fiction novel. In the past, I've asked questions such as how to write a great protagonist, is writer's block real or a myth, which do writers prefer, simple or purple prose, and many other questions, which you can see in this playlist right here. But watch this video first, and then rewind back to this point, click on this link, and check out all the other videos that I have on the channel. Now, even if you're not a scholar in the history of the progression of storytelling, you can pretty much assume that at the very beginning, stories were told, not read, because the majority of people couldn't read. And some of the best stories were written down, so better orators could tell these stories to more and more people. Then the community grew and expanded, and these orators couldn't be everywhere at once. Plus, who's got time to get up from their hut and travel across enemy and predator infested roads just to hear some story about how ancient warriors killed a thing that was plaguing a hamlet? And since Audible didn't have the foresight to establish themselves in the early 1400s, Johannes Gutenberg swooped in and took charge with the printing press, printing about 200 Bibles. And thus, printing books for mass distribution was born. But we're going off topic. From the 1400s, the written and printed books ruled. And yes, I'm going to gloss over film and radio in our historical timeline, because that's not really what we're talking about today. Anyway, in 1952, the very first audiobook was recorded. Fast forward to 2020, and researchers project a 40% increase between 2018 and 2020 in audiobook sales, while ebooks in the same period experienced approximately a 4% drop, and printed books a 5% drop. Now, I'll be honest, in the last 10 years, I've read far more audiobooks than I have printed books. And that didn't trouble me before. But now that I'm working towards becoming a writer myself, I thought I'd throw this question on the writer's block. Is listening to audiobooks bad for me as a writer? And here are some experts to educate me on whether listening to audiobooks is bad for me as a writer.
I don't know if it would hurt you personally, because as well as I know you, I don't know you that well. But I feel like listening to audiobooks as a reader is totally fine. Like, I think it's totally fine. I think listening to audiobooks as a writer is fine, but I think reading for a writer is essential. And I would urge, because there's something different happens, when you're engaging your eyes in the page and you're holding the book in your hands and you're reading as opposed to listening. I just think there's slightly different experiences of the world, and as a writer, to get used to like how that feels is essential, because you're going to try and make someone else feel that same way with text on the page, And I think that I wouldn't say don't do it at all. That'd be crazy. But I think to do it more than you read books is likely. I don't know. I mean, it's a mad experiment, right? Can you just listen to audiobooks and still write these really brilliant narratives? You're going to show me, I suppose. I could be completely wrong. But for me personally, I just love that thing of just the thought process that goes on for me as a writer when I'm reading, the things that start to spark off in my brain. I don't generally get that from listening to stories. Like, it's not the same, And so because they're different, I expect that they would have a different result. Also, the sole difference with reading as opposed to listening, you've touched on it just then, is that when reading, you have to be totally committed. You can't do anything else, and it's that level of commitment, that kind of meditative state, that if you're reading the right book, then you go off into this other world, and it's literally like doing what I'm writing about in the book, right? It is like being in meditation. It's like you go into this waking dream where you can see everything that's going on, but your body is still here, I think that's the bit that's really important, you know, that kind of like osmosis, you know, where you just travel to another world in your head. And when you hit that point, that's the magic, you know. And yeah, you're not going to get that from an audiobook, really. If you did, you probably, like, you know, bump into your kitchen cupboard or something like that, or do something, you know, like, and hurt yourself badly. But that's what I think is the crux of it. It's just being in that. It's completely for yourself, by yourself. And no other art form that I can think of does that.
I would say no. There are some books that I have just listened to in audio, and for me personally, I like to see how it's written so I can stare at it, so I can dissect it. But at the same time, by listening to it, I start to see pictures in my head, and that helps me as a writer. And also the pacing of the spoken word helps me. So when I listen to, one book I listened to is Catherine Stedman's There's Something in the Water, a really great thriller. And then that kept me on the edge of my seat. The book did too, you know, the physical thing. But I think as a writer, it's important to hear how books are read, because some people just consume books via audio. And it's good to think about how spoken word sounds, how dialogue sounds. If descriptions go on for forever and ever for 17 pages, then, you know, on an audiobook that might not work as well. So I think that it can be a good thing for writers to listen to audiobooks. I wouldn't say go live in the library, but if you find a certain section of the audiobook that you want to see in print form, like make a note of where that is in the text, and then go back and look at it. I've done that with Kate Morton's The Clockmaker's Daughter. That book was wonderful as well, and I started it with audiobook in the car, mostly because my husband, he doesn't read books. He listens to audiobooks because he falls asleep when he reads. So he hasn't actually read my books yet. Hopefully if they become audiobooks, he will listen, which is fine. But for that book, some of the descriptions were so beautiful and powerful that I took note of where they were, and I went back and looked at them. And then I thought, well, why does this work? How does this work in print form? How does this work in spoken form? So I think audiobooks are, in some, good things for authors. People should still look at print things, because that's also an experience, and you'll see things structure-wise that you would miss potentially listening to them. But I don't think you need to freak out or, spend lots of time in a library in the middle of a pandemic.
Audiobooks are not detrimental to your developing your writing skills. I would actually say they improve. What a lot of people don't realize is that the part of your brain that's so before I ramble, I'm a primary school teacher, so we actually studied this a bit in college. So basically, when a child, that's how I think about adults read too, but when a child is reading, the part of their brain that lights up is the same part of their brain as when they're listening or when they're being read to. So as an adult, when you have a book there in front of you, like even if you think about how you read now, you are telling yourself the story. You can still hear your own voice in your head as you're reading the text in front of you. So it's the same with listening to an audiobook. The same parts of your brain light up. I would say that audiobooks in the past may have had a negative connotation, but I think people are starting to cop on a little bit now. I have seen people who say that unless it's a physical thing in their hand, they won't read it. And I'm kind of like, okay, you're missing out, but fine. I mean, there's like, I think readers in general, they feel like audiobooks are cheating. But I strongly disagree. I mean, I think audiobooks make books far more accessible. I'm unfortunately, I'm quite a slow reader. I can't focus as much because I have so many things I want to do. And audiobooks have opened up the doorway for me to to process more books and to eat through them a bit faster. And I will say, because my intention is this year is to record the audiobook myself of my novel, The Longest Night. And one thing that's great is now, because I'm starting to also plan and write the sequel to The Longest Night, I am thinking of the audiobook, and it's I think it's improving my writing, because I'm looking at sentences that are in The Longest Night that I'm like, oh, that's so long. Like when I try to read that, I have to stop and take a breath, even with the commas. Like it's way too long. So then I'm thinking, oh, well, that means obviously there are readers out there who, when they read that sentence, they had to go back and reread it. So I think when you're writing, if you think about it more like a conversation with your reader and more like the style that audiobooks are, it will only improve your writing and make it less wordy.
And there you have it. Experts have schooled me on the effect audiobooks have on me as a writer. Check the description below for links to their work. But what did you think about what they said? Leave all of your opinions in the comments to this video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more expert tips on how to write, publish, and promote your first fiction novel. I'm Marcus, and I'll see you next time. Audible, I know this might be controversial that I'm suggesting that your product might be bad to writers, but I'm just asking, okay? So no hard feelings? Call me?